I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Burns.
And this is the Baseball History Time Machine.
And what do we got today?
What we got today is sluggers of the 1930s.
And why do we have that on our agenda?
Because I mentioned in each of the first two episodes that we would do an episode on sluggers of the 1930s soon, so we may as well now, which is soon.
Good idea. We can't keep stringing the good folk along.
I do want to say before we start, I did an episode called Sluggers of the 1930s more than a decade ago, 12 years ago, on my old YouTube channel, Sunday Baseball, or Watch Sunday Baseball, all one word. But this is going to be in a lot more depth.
Because we have loads of sluggers and slugging to talk about, because it was a real sluggers decade by the sounds of it.
No.
It's not?
No. You would think that, but when you look at it closely, it's actually not really true. Okay, there were a lot of prodigious feats of slugging and homers in the 1930s. Hack Wilson set the National League homer mark with 56 in 1930, and that would stand for nearly 70 years. He also drove in 191 runs that year, an RBI mark that will probably stand until the end of time. Jimmie Foxx and Hank Greenberg also made serious runs at Babe Ruth's then single-season home run record of 60 from 1927, and both stalled at 58. And it seems like there was a ton of slugging going on. But you know what? Actually, there wasn't.
But when you say it like that, it really does sound like there was a lot of slugging. If not the 1930s, though, then there were a lot in the 1920s, maybe? I feel like there was a lot back in those days.
After Babe Ruth began to revolutionize home run hitting at the end of the teens and in the early 20s, sure, there were others of the new generation who joined in hitting homers in the 1920s. But it was still quite rare to hit 30 or even only 20 home runs in a season. I mentioned last week that Chuck Klein set the National League record of 43 homers in 1929, but before that year, only Rogers Hornsby, Cy Williams, Hack Wilson, and Jim Bottomley had ever even topped 30 in the National League in its 50-year history, and 21 homers was still good enough to lead the league in 1926. And in the AL, outside of Ruth and Gehrig, well, there was Bob Meusel, Ken Williams, and Tilly Walker before 1929, but that's it.
Okay, so only like 9 guys had hit over 30 homers in a season before 1929. Why 1929?
1929 did see an offensive explosion, and that went into overdrive in 1930. But still, consider this. Today, every team in baseball hits well over 100 and often well over 200 home runs every season. Back in the 1930s, though, even topping 100 as a team didn't happen that often.
Seems like it would have with Ruth, Fox, and Gehrig, and all those guys.
Well, you'd be surprised. Except for the freak offensive year in 1930, there was usually only one or max 2 NL teams that would top 100 homers each season that decade, and none at all in 1933. And over in the American League, it was only the Philadelphia A's, who had Al Simmons and Jimmie Foxx, and the Yankees, who had Ruth and Gehrig, who topped 100 in a season 1930 to 1933. In 1934, Cleveland managed an even 100 homers, thanks to Earl Averill and Hal Trosky. In 1935, it was the Tigers with the rise of Hank Greenberg. In 1936, it was only the Yankees and the Indians. In 1937, it was 4 of the 8 AL teams for the first time ever, with the Indians, Tigers, and Yankees joined by the Red Sox, who now had Jimmie Foxx. But in 1938, the Red Sox did not hit 100 homers as a team, even with Foxx hitting 50 by himself. And every year of the decade had at least a team or two hitting only 60, 50, 40, or sometimes not even 30 homers in a season.
Okay, so who had the lowest team total for that decade in the American League?
The White Sox hit only 27 homers in 1931.
As a team, who in the NL had the lowest?
The Reds, also in 1931, had just 21 homers. See, we still think of it as a big slugging era because of the exploits of just a few hitters. And they were pretty impressive. It was Jimmie Foxx who actually hit the most home runs in the 10 years of the 1930s with 415. Lou Gehrig was second with 347, and Mel Ott third with 307. Those three are by a large margin the only men who hit 300 homers for the decade. I should note that the aging Babe Ruth, who played 5 full seasons in the 1930s at the end of his career, still hit 198 homers, which is pretty awesome.
That's still like 40 home runs a year.
And he began the decade at 35 years old, retiring in 1935 at the age of 40.
Okay, but these guys, Ruth, Gehrig, Ott, Fox, these guys you can read about in any baseball history book, right? What about some of the lesser-known slugging feats of the 1930s?
That's what I wanted to get to, so I will go into a few. And these feats seem even more impressive when you again realize there really wasn't that much slugging going on.
Okay, give me one.
In 1930, rookie Wally Berger hit 38 home runs for the Boston Braves, a rookie record that stood until Frank Robinson tied it in 1956. Then Mark McGwire obliterated it in 1987, and then just a few years ago, Aaron Judge and Pete Alonso hit 52 and 53 in their rookie seasons. Berger, somewhat unfairly forgotten today, was a huge star in the early 1930s and appeared in the first 4 All-Star games before injuries derailed his career mid-decade when he was around 30.
That's quite sad. Give me another one.
Well, there is Old Tomato Face.
Old Tomato Face.
Old Tomato Face. That is Hall of Fame catcher Gabby Harnett's nickname.
Old Tomato Face.
Yep. And Old Tomato Face hit 37 home runs in a season, which was the single-season record for catchers until Roy Campanella broke it with 41 in 1953. Johnny Bench then held the record for decades after hitting 45 in 1970. But just the other year, Salvador Perez hit 48, so that's the new catcher record, though Perez did play like 40 games or so at DH that season.
What about, let me think, shortstops? They didn't traditionally hit a lot of homers.
Brooklyn shortstop Glenn Wright hit 22 homers in 1930, which doesn't sound like much nowadays, but it was the all-time record for shortstops, and that lasted exactly a decade until Joe Cronin hit 24 in 1940.
Okay, who has that record now? Is it A-Rod?
Yeah, Alex Rodriguez and Ernie Banks now actually have the entire shortstop homers top 10, except for Fernando Tatis Jr., tying for the bottom spot with 42, although he did play a bunch of games in the outfield the year he did that. A-Rod's 57 in 2002 is the shortstop homer record.
Okay, but only 22 homers was good enough to be the top shortstop mark for the whole 1930s.
Wright had already set the all-time shortstop homer record with 18 in 1925, which was broken in 1929 by Travis Jackson's 21, and then Wright's 22 in 1930. Before 1925, the shortstop homer record was Bad Bill Dahlian's 15 homers way back in 1894, and yes, that is how you pronounce his last name, Dahlian. And after Wright's new record in 1930, no other shortstop even hit 20 homers in a season from 1930 to 1939. Cronin hit 19 in 1939 before setting the new record in 1940.
Well, there wasn't really that much slugging going on when you break it down like that.
You know,
Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.
You know what, though? One other shortstop hit 19 one season in the 1930s, but I think it deserves special mention because that shortstop managed to slug .607, which was a season slugging percentage record for shortstops that's only ever been passed by Banks, Rodriguez, Tatis, and Corey Seager.
Hold on. Somebody slugged over 600 of only 19 homers.
Yeah, and that someone was none other than Pirates shortstop Archie Vaughan in 1935. And just how could he slug that high with only 19 homers? The answer is he hit .385 that year. And since the dude could also take a walk, he had an on-base percentage of .491, which is still the record for shortstops, an all-time record going back to the 1870s.
That's incredible. But does this include the Negro Leagues as well?
It does not. And just poking around Negro League stats, Willie Wells had one higher average season, a higher on-base percentage season, and several higher slugging seasons, but they were also in far shorter seasons against a far smaller total talent pool of players. Now, I had to look that up. I don't know Negro League stats at all like I do the other stats because they weren't published for most of my life, which is a shame because I can't really talk about them all that knowledgeably.
Do you know a lot about Wells at least?
No, I don't actually. I know he put up some amazing numbers when he was in his early 20s, and then they just dropped off a cliff in 1931 when he was 26, and I don't know why. He had a couple really good seasons after that before retiring in 1948, but nothing like his 5-year peak up to 1930. And again, I really don't know why.
Maybe that's your homework.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's good homework. Okay, I'm going to quickly mention yet another shortstop here, all right?
Sure, give us another shortstop.
1 year after Vaughn's incredible season, which was in 1935, another shortstop actually topped Vaughn's .385 average and put up what is still the modern batting average record for shortstops. Another Southern Hall of Famer, actually, Luke Appling, who hit .388 in 1936 and drove in 128 home runs, but only hit 6 homers because, once again, there wasn't really that much slugging going on.
Hold up, you said the modern record for shortstops. Who has the all-time batting average record for shortstops?
That would be Huey Jennings, who hit .401 in 1896, the only shortstop to top 400.
Pretty impressive.
You know what's really impressive? That Jennings drove in 120 runs that year, but hit exactly 0 home runs.
That's a pretty crazy stat. Like, the small ball enthusiasts would be loving that kind of stat.
And also this, okay? Jennings didn't walk or strike out much that year, with just 19 walks and just 11 strikeouts. But he was hit by a pitch 51 times.
51 times. That's gotta hurt. That's really kind of putting your body on the line.
That is actually still the single season record for being hit by a pitch. And other than Jennings himself 2 other times, only Ron Hunt has ever even topped 40 with 50 in 1971.
Well, you could say that these guys really crowd the plate and that they have a high pain threshold.
Now, I do have another slugging feat of the 1930s to talk about, actually, when I'm not digressing about, everything else. My favorite one of the 1930s, a feat managed by Rudolph Preston York.
I know him, Rudy York. Powerful guy.
Indeed he was. Rudy York came up with the Tigers as a first baseman, but the Tigers already had a great one, Hall of Famer Hank Greenberg.
Not going to have a lot of playing time there, playing behind Greenberg.
No. So they tried York at third base for some weeks, but he was very clearly not a third baseman. But he had a lethal bat. So in desperation, on August 4th, 1937, the Detroit Tigers played rookie Rudy York at catcher to keep his bat in the lineup.
That's some desperation, and I'm going to guess it was a good call.
You have no idea. In the month of August 1937, now playing catcher, rookie Rudy York hit 18 homers and drove in 50 runs.
18 home runs in 1 month. That's who you were hinting about in the first episode.
Yes, and yes. 18 home runs in 1 month as a rookie.
And it was the record at the time.
It was, but not just for rookies. It was the overall record for home runs in a calendar month, passing Babe Ruth's mark of 17 in September 1927. And York's mark lasted not just for rookies, but for everyone until Sammy Sosa hit 20 in 1 month in 1998, 61 years later.
Well, that's a very, very impressive beginning to any career.
It sure was.
What about 50 RBI in 1 month? Was that the record?
It was the rookie record, but not the overall record.
Which was?
Hack Wilson in his 1930 campaign drove in 53 runs in August. That's the National League record, and is tied for the Major League record with Joe DiMaggio, who drove in 53 in August 1939. York's 50 actually tied the AL record at the time, though, which was Lou Gehrig's 50 from July 1930. Actually, 6 of the top 10 RBI calendar months of all time are from the 1930s, and 3 more are from 1928 and 1929.
Okay, so we're missing one. Who's the other one in the top 10?
This, you will never guess. I bet nobody out there would ever guess this. Okay. Gus Bell had 45 RBI in June 1953.
Yeah, I never would have guessed that.
I don't think anyone outside the Bell family would guess that. Here's something else, though. Of the top 25 most RBI calendar months, those with 42 or more RBI in a calendar month, 23 of 25 are from the 1920s and 1930s.
Gus Bell is one of the other 2. Who's the last one then?
One guy had 43 RBI in August 1943. You should be able to guess who that guy was.
Rudy York?
Yep, Rudy York is on that list twice.
Is anybody on that list 3 times then?
Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio.
But wait, no one has had 42 or more RBIs in a calendar month since the 1950s. What about Manny Ramirez when he had that huge RBI season back in 99?
He had 165 RBI that year, which is 14th on the all-time list, but he never had more than 33 in one calendar month.
That's a hell of a lot of RBIs, though.
Except for that season and 2 seasons by Big Sam Thompson from the 1800s, the entire top 20 single-season RBI totals are all from the 1920s and 1930s.
Wait a minute. It's sluggers who lead the league in RBI. So if those top season totals are from the 20s and the 30s, there must have been loads of slugging going on based on those metrics.
But they were all done by the same small handful of sluggers. First of all, only 2 were in the NL, so 15 of the top 20 RBI seasons of all time were American League players from the 1920s and 30s. Babe Ruth 3 times, Jimmy Foxx 3 times, Hank Greenberg twice, and Joe DiMaggio, Al Simmons, and Hal Trosky once each. And if you keep going down the list, those same names keep appearing.
Hang on, who's Hal Trotsky? You mentioned him before.
Yeah, Trosky, a very much forgotten slugger of the 1930s. Cleveland's first baseman, who had 6 straight seasons of over 100 RBI and hit as many as 42 homers in a season.
He sounds legit.
He was the real deal, and he drove in 162 runs in 1936. But the American League in the 1930s had first basemen Fox, Gehrig, and Greenberg. So Trosky was never even an all-star, and his career was derailed when he began getting migraines so bad he couldn't play.
That's a real shame.
See, the thing about the 1930s is there was a lot of hitting going on, but not all that much slugging.
Like how?
Like, the American League batting averages ranged from 273 to 288, which was actually down from the 1920s. And the AL would never reach even 273 again after the 1930s until 1994, when league slugging averages were a lot higher. So there were a lot of guys getting on base in the 30s, but not that many of them driving them all in with big blasts.
Okay, I think I get it now. So RBIs don't necessarily equate to slugging, per se.
There were big slugging moments, though. Lou Gehrig hit 4 homers in one game in 1932.
Was he the first guy to ever do that?
He was the first in the 20th century, but he was the 3rd overall.
All right, who was the other 2 then?
Bobby Lowe in 1894 and Big Ed Delahanty in 1897.
Delahanty, I've heard that, but who was Bobby Lowe?
Bobby Lowe was a decent, if unspectacular, player for the Boston dynasty of the 1890s who won 5 pennants in 8 years.
They're now the Atlanta Braves, right?
They are.
Was this back when they were the Boston Braves?
No, this was before that. The National League from 1877 didn't want team nicknames, so Boston was supposed to be Boston or the Bostons. But that was soon enough overpowered by the fans and the teams themselves. Already in 1885, Boston was known as the Bean Eaters, though you have to be careful with old nicknames.
How so?
Well, it's semi-common knowledge that the New York Giants were first called Giants by manager Jim Muttrey. He claimed in the 19-teens that he coined the name in 1888, but as far as I am aware, it first appeared in print in the New York World on April 14th, 1885, and was in common use within weeks. Hey, fun fact, the 1885 New York Giants were the best second-place team in history.
What do you mean?
They finished 85-27.
Holy shit, 85 wins, 27 losses. What kind of winning percentage is that?
759.
So 759 and you're finishing second. That's tough luck. Who beat them?
The Chicagos, today's Cubs, otherwise known then as the White Stockings, but also, if you look at old newspapers, the Babies.
The Babies?
As in Anson's Babies, after team captain Adrian Anson, whom we call Cap or Pop, but whom the papers in the 1880s often called Baby Anson, and the team Anson's Babies.
How come?
I have no idea.
That's a shame. Sounds like there could be a story there.
There probably is a good story there. Maybe I'll learn it one day. I don't know. Well, anyhow, back to Bobby Lowe of the Boston Baseball Club.
Yeah, back to Bobby Lowe.
Lowe had an 18-year career primarily as a second baseman. He was a good defensive player with excellent range, but overall a below-average hitter, as his career OPS plus is only 87.
With 100 being average.
Right.
How the heck did he hit 4 homers in one game then?
He did have power, especially right when the modern pitching distance came in 1893, when he was 3rd in the league with 14 homers, and then he was tied for 2nd in 1894 with 17, one behind Triple Crown winner Hugh Duffy, Lowe's teammate.
So that year, Duffy set the all-time batting record at 440, and Lowe hit 4 homers in one game.
2 of them in one inning, actually.
Wow.
So here's the game, according to Bobby Lowe himself, okay? The Chicago Daily News had a series in the 1940s called My Biggest Baseball Day, which was sports writers and players remembering just that. 172 out of the 175 articles are about stuff post-1900, but 3 are not, and one of them is Bobby Lowe's recollections from Decoration Day 1894.
Decoration Day is now Memorial Day, right?
It is, and it used to be every May 30th, though now it's the last Monday in May.
So May 30th, 1894.
A Decoration Day doubleheader against the Porkopolis Nine.
The who?
Cincinnati. Cincinnati is Porkopolis.
Okay, Porkopolis is a way better name than Cincinnati.
I totally agree, and I say it because that's how this was written in the newspapers. They called them Porkopolis. It is an awesome name for a city. It was called that in the sports pages back in the 1890s.
Cincinnati would have cooler team nickname options if it was called the Porkopolis. I mean, the Trotters, the Bacon, the Ribs.
The swine.
That's pretty negative, though.
Whoa. The Pittsburgh Pirates. Pirates is pretty negative. It depends. You just got to own it, right?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, the Dodgers were those damn trolley Dodgers. They owned that, right?
That's true.
Anyhow, Decoration Day doubleheader at Boston against visiting Cincinnati. Boston wins Game 1, and here are Bobby Lowe's own words for what follows. Before the afternoon game, Miss Lowe and myself had dinner at the Old North Railroad Station. A fish dinner. I always liked fish.
I already love Lowe's color commentary.
There were about 8,000 fans jamming the stands, and Nichols, then pitching for us, was facing Chamberlain.
Is Nichols Kid Nichols?
He is. And the kid has a legitimate claim to being the best pitcher of the 1890s. Well, he and Amos Ruzzi, anyhow. Maybe Cy Young as well, although I think Nichols was better that decade than Young was. Nichols actually won 30 or more games 7 times in the 1890s. That is the most such seasons in a whole career as well. One more than Tim Keefe or John Clarkson, and twice more than Young, who pitched 7 more seasons than Nichols did.
I didn't realize Nichols was that good.
Oh, he was. And get this. Kid Nichols won 362 games, but did not pitch in the majors in 1902 or 1903, while still a great pitcher. He co-owned and was player manager for the Kansas City Blue Stockings in the minors those years, but if he'd pitched those 2 seasons in the majors, he likely would have won 40 games or so total, or more, which would have made him a career 400-game winner, the only other one being Cy Young until Walter Johnson came along, and those 2 are still the only 2.
I bet Nichols would have made the Hall of Fame quicker if he'd had won 400 games.
I think so, too. Oh, and as for opposing pitcher Chamberlain, this is none other than Elton Chamberlain.
Elton Chamberlain.
Yep.
That's the coolest name I've heard.
It gets better. His nickname was Icebox.
Icebox Chamberlain.
Yeah.
He must have been the coolest guy on the planet.
Hence the name. He was a star with the Browns in the late 1880s, and in 1894 is winding up his career with Porkopolis.
Elton Chamberlain. Icebox Chamberlain. Dude, I want that on a tobacco card.
You can get a reprint for $3 or $4 actually, though I saw an original for $632 on eBay. Hey, fun fact, me and my Houston buddies used to call Chris Davensky Icebox Davensky his first couple years with the Astros. But back to the game at hand.
Yeah.
Okay, Bobby Lowe's words again. I didn't get on base in the first inning, but we got 2 runs. So did Cincinnati. Nothing happened in the second, but in the third, I was up first again and hit over the left field fence. A fellow named Bug Holliday was playing left for Cincy, and he went back a few steps and then stopped because he saw it was no use. We got 9 runs off Chamberlain. He wasn't taken out like they do now when a pitcher gets hit hard. And by golly, I came up with Jack Ryan, our catcher, on base and hit another homer over Holliday's head.
It's a pretty good game so far.
Nichols got up off the bench when I came in and shook hands and hollered to the sports writers over to one side of the stands. Ain't that a record in 1 inning? I don't suppose they knew.
Well, it is, right?
Yeah, okay. In the Texas League, Gene Rye hit 3 homers in 1 inning in 1930. But in the majors, Charlie Jones was first with 2, as far as I'm aware, back in 1880. Anyhow, you should have heard that crowd when I came up in the 5th and hit another homer. The third went over the fence by about 20 feet and was almost on the exact line of the other 2. The fans were jumping up and down, and Soleil was telling everyone I'd tied Ed Williamson, Cap Anson, and Dan Bruthers, who also hit 3 in 1 game. As I walked to the plate in the 7th, the crowd was yelling, 4, Bobby, hit another one. And dang my soul if I didn't. I almost fell down when I saw the ball going for that fence the 4th time. Holliday threw up both hands and ran back to see by how much it would clear. He said afterwards the ball was about 10 feet above the fence. By the time I'd circled the bases, there were silver dollars and other coins lying on the ground. They were all from me, and we held up the game to gather them up. I got about $100 altogether, and the funny thing was, when I came up in the 9th, I hit a single. Everybody laughed. I suppose it did look silly after 4 homers.
That's a really cool story.
It sure is.
Hey, who's Bug Holiday.
Bug Holiday was a real Porkopolis slugger. 1894 was his last full season. He hit .376, which was only ninth in the league in such a hitter's year, but he was also in the top 10 in homers and RBI. His real name was James, but he was apparently called Bug because he looked small in the outfield. He was 5'11", but only weighed 151 pounds, though despite that, he had serious power, leading the league in homers twice, banging out 19 as a rookie in 1889, which was both the American Association record, the Reds played in the AA at the time, and the general rookie record. But hey, this is supposed to be sluggers of the 1930s, not sluggers of the 1890s or sluggers of the 1880s.
Well, sluggers of the 1880s and 1890s are both episodes we really should do in the future.
That is a great idea. I will add that to my list, which is getting quite long.
Do you have anything else to talk about today, though, about the sluggers of the 1930s?
We do not.
Okay, so let's wrap it up.
Okay, we shall wrap it up, but also remember, if you join us on Patreon, you can get all our content ad-free, but beyond that, the more support we get there, the more time we can take away from our other work to make more episodes, longer episodes, and whatever weirdness we come up with. So go to patreon.com and search for a Baseball History Time Machine.
All right, goodbye to everybody out there for now. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.
That we will. Once again, I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Burns.
And this is the Baseball History Time Machine.